So I welcome you all for the first SET Online meeting in 2021, and this is the year that everybody was looking forward to. As always, first I would like to thank our sponsorship from EIS for allowing us to use all the resources free of charge, and please make sure to check our website for the recorded lectures, learning tools, and we even have virtual field trips, which I think in next year will be also pretty important resource. 2021 kickoff lecture is given by Professor Paul Yu from Northern Carolina State University. He has finished his master's at the Institute of Oceanology in Chinese Academy of Sciences before he moved to States for completing his PhD at Virginia Institute of Marine Science, Marine Science College of Williams and Mary. Before joining North Carolina State University, he was a postdoc at Woods Hole Oceanography Institution. And Paul is interested in sedimentary processes at the land-ocean interface, in particular when this interface is crossed by a river. And his research is related to river flux and fate of material from sinks to source. So without further ado, Paul, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And right now I will give you a virtual mic.
Ola, thank you very much for your introduction and the invitation. I also give my special thanks for this SET online series and Professor Stephen's invitation for me to give a talk in this very special, challenging time in our whole life during this pandemic. But we should also appreciate the technology today. We are able to meet online across the world, and hope we can build up together as a community. And today, I will talk about the feats of the world major river-derived sediments to the sea. I want to see the difference and the comparison, the longshore transport was the cross-shelf transport. And this is a work, is a teamwork, involve many partners and colleagues like Dave DeMaster, Chuck Neutral, Stu Keel, John Milliman, and Professor Yang, and a couple colleagues in Vietnam and Myanmar. Okay, when we talk about the river-derived sediment to the sea, there are always a term called source to sink. And from all the way the land material transport to the coastal zone and then to the sea and to the deep sea basin. And there's correspondingly, there's two questions. How much material coming down? That's the flux part. And where they go, this is the feed part. So more specifically, people talk about the historical change of the flux and how the flux change is caused by the natural factors or the human impact. When we talk about the feed, this is the sink part. So always see what's the seasonally driving, what's the solid part, what's the dissolved part, what's the cross shelf, what's the longshore transport, what's the proximal deposition, what's the distal deposition, what's the nearshore, offshore shelf, what's deep sea. Today, specifically, I will focus on the couple questions. What is the cross shelf transport? What's the longshore transport? Then the proximal was distal, or nearshore was offshore. So let me see. And when we talk about the sediment from the river to the ocean, there is a classic diagram published by John Milliman and Phosphorus. John Milliman is my PhD advisor in Virginia Institute of Marine Science. And as you can see, the arrow in this diagram signify the scale of the material transport from the continent to the sea. As you notice that overall collectively, there's a 19 billion ton sediment per year from the land to the ocean, or other way to see is 19 gigatons per year. I think this is a very easy number to remember for this community. And also, as you can see in Asia, this is something we need to pay attention. There's a huge arrow, black arrow, compare other continents. There's a 12.5 gigatons per year sediment from this East and South Asia and Western Pacific, Oceania. And this is roughly about 70% of the global river-derived sediment to the sea. So to see this, as you can see, there's many large river systems developed in this region, like all the way from the Yangtze, from the Pearl River, Mekong, Irrawaddy, Ganges, Brahmaputra, and the Indus River. And also one thing I want to point out, if you take a look, this 70% of the river-derived sediment, the population inside this circle is 3.7 billion. This is more than the population outside of this circle. So that's another way to look is the economy. The GDP growth rate, as you can East Asia, South Asia, like Shanghai, like Shenzhen, Hong Kong, Manila, Jakarta, you know, this is almost every city is more than 5% of the GDP growth rate. This is the rapid economy growing area with a huge population. So geologically, this is also a tectonic active region. As you can see, the Indian plate and Eurasia plate coast uplifting Himalaya. And so this is in this area, all the way in the Western Pacific, extend to Indian Ocean here. So this is also a tectonic active combined with the Eastern Monsoon, Asian Monsoon, and the Indian Monsoon. With the tectonic active and with a lot of rainfall, this is no surprise, no wonder we developed so much large river with a huge sediment load discharge, like the Yellow River, like the Yangtze, like the Pearl, Red, Mekong, Irrawaddy, Ganges, Brahmaputra. But the one thing I want to point out is my other part of the study interesting is try to see how much material coming down, the flux part. Today, I will not talk about this. This is my study based on the collection of other global major river systems. As you can see, the blue means the water discharge, the red or the shadowed bar, this is the sediment discharge. As you can see, many large river systems, the sediment sharply decreased in the last 50 years, like the Yellow River, like Chofia River, like the Indus River, like Colorado River, like the Nile River, and Godavari, Krishna in India, and even Mekong and the Red River. And there's some different from the South America river system. If you want to know more about those global river sediment discharge change, so you're welcome to go to this talk series. This is just go to my webpage, mes.ncsu.edu/sea-level-S2S. Then you're able to see many related talk about individual river system. And so, of course, overall, in terms of the sediment flux, as you can see, East Asia experienced a major change, sharply decreasing in the last 50 years. And also same as the South Asia. South Asia is orange color, as you can see, 1960s to now, decreased sharply. East and South Asia almost reduced 80%, 80% of the original sediment load to the sea, sharply decreased. And as you see, the Europe and Africa that also experience decreasing, like this black one. The South America, basically the yellow one, is not really changed that much. And so in terms of the feet, when we talk about the feet of the sediment to the sea, and very luckily in the past 20 years, with many colleagues and with some of the students are able to study the yellow river-derived sediment and have more than 6 research crews over there, and also the Yangtze River sediment in East China Sea, and also 6 research crews around Taiwan understand the small river-derived sediment, and the Pearl River, the Red River, and the Mekong River. Mekong River, I have 6 crews and 2 research crews in Gulf of Tonkin. And most recently, my colleague and I, we are working the offshore of the Irrawaddy River in Andaman Sea, try to understand this large river system and the Salween River, the feet of the sediment to the sea. As we mentioned, this is roughly in the East and South Asia count about 70% of the global river-derived sediment to the sea. So study, understand those river-derived sediment is very critical, very important for this community. So when we talk about the feet, back to 1995, down right, so give this diagram and see the river have a discharge with the plume when they reach to the ocean with the tide, with the wave, with even internal wave, a longshore flow, the current also driving. And so that's the interaction process. And also if you look a little bit detailed, Rocky Guy from Woods Hole also give this diagram with the river plume. We have flocculation, we have a boundary layer, we have gravity flow, some turbid flow, then could be transported to the offshore. So this give a pretty good view cross shelf the river-derived material to the deep sea. And most recently, Harkison, give a review paper, signal from the source, from the mountain, transport all the way to the coastal and nearshore area. Also, beside the physical process, as they mentioned, and also talk about the biochemical process. The signal from the source when they reach to the deep sea could be completely different. So this is give a complex of this topic. And in the past, when we talk about the feet of the river-derived sediment or depositional record, most of the time we discuss with the relationship with the sea level flocculation. For example, during the sea level low stand, with the sea level rise up with the maximum flooding surface, we have high stand system trapped. The classic second stratigraphy mainly focus on cross-shelf transport and depositional record. This is in the textbook. In the classroom, we talk about this all the time. And for example, like this, we even go very detailedly the transgressive, the claniform, the on-lap, off-lap. But when we talk about those large river-derived sediment, the feet, there's much more beyond what we just see, the cross-shelf transport and the second stratigraphy. And today, I will go quickly with you about the major river system, the feet of the sediment. Okay, for example, the Yellow River, the Yangtze River, the Pearl River, and the Mekong River, and the Irrawaddy Salween River, the Ganges-Brahmaputra, and also talk about the Nile River system, the Pearl River, the Ebro, and the Rhine River system, and also in the Amazon, Mississippi River, and the Congo River. I will, give a little bit overview, big picture, for us to have a better understanding beyond the cross-shelf transport. There's a major portion have a longshore transport. This could help kind of refresh and give us a new understanding of the big picture of the major river-derived sediment to the sea. For example, the Yellow River Delta, and this is the Yellow River Delta. As you can see, there's a big plume left the river mouth go all the way along shore transport. If you look at this is the proximal deposits. This is the Yellow River Delta. as you can see clearly, there is a claniform deltic subaqueous delta accumulated near the river mouth. And you see clearly here. But if you look at this one, we also studied along the plume, have a seismic study. And this one review away from the river mouth. There's also a longshore transport, as you can see clearly here. And so transport along the shore form that kind of subaqueous delta. If you look at the P2 and P3, there's no major around this peninsula. The only source is from this river system, a longshore transport accumulated this 30 meters lobe accumulate here. If you look at other shore seismic chip profile, this is also indicate far away from the river mouth. There's also a 40 meters mud, a lobe sitting on the seafloor. This is definitely from the river, but this is not similar. This is not the cross-shelf proximal deposits. Instead, we can see this is the river mouth. All the way from the river mouth, this is 500 to 600 kilometers. We have a 40 meters distal depot center. This is very important. Not so many people talk about the distal depot center 20 years ago. And actually in the last 20 years, after we study all those river systems, this become a very important sedimentary concept when we talk about the river-derived sediment to the sea. So as you can see here, this is the fate of the yellow river-derived sediment to the sea. And so once again, this is a proximal delta plan, delta front, and pro delta, and then transport all the way. This is at least 500 kilometers. We have a 40 meters distal depot center. And this diagram give an idea, we have that kind of delta plan, subaqueous delta, about 10%, 50%, we build the delta, we can see the delta plan. Another 40% actually transport along the shore with a distal depot center. That's a very important concept. So is this river system unique? So let's look at other system. Other large river system is Yangtze. The Yangtze system, as you can see, this is the surface sediment distribution over the East China Sea shelf. And we conduct the similar seismic survey over there. And I want to show you two slides, two profile. One is immediately off the river mouth. This is the cross shelf number 1. Then we show 2 more, 5 and 6. This is away from the river mouth. So let's see. This is the one show beautifully cross shelf from the river mouth, the cross shelf, the claniform. This is nothing surprising. And this is a textbook. As you can see, the flooding surface, the high standard system tract. This is beautiful. But let's look at the other two. The other two is number 5 and 6 profile. As you can see, this is not close to the river mouth. And this is a longshore drifting. But we also observed up to 40 meters that claniform, high stand Holocene accumulation. Just like the river import the cross shelf, but actually the driving, the transport mechanism is the longshore drifting. And then you form that kind of a longshore claniform. So that's very, very interesting. And now we are able to put them together, the fate of the Yangtze River-derived sediment. As you can see, beside this proximal near the river mouth, majority of the material delivered to the ocean actually transport, go along shore far away, even enter into the Taiwan Strait. So we put a model here similar to the Yellow River. As you can see, the Yangtze River-derived sediment, the proximal 50%, 20%. We have that Sebago Delta, 30%, 800 kilometers, transport 800 kilometers away from the river mouth. Wow, that's two large river systems show similar pattern. So now let's, again, this diagram explained particularly during the winter season, the coastal current driving the material away from the river mouth, but formed this kind of beautifully coniform, as you can see. If you want to know detail, you can look at these two papers. I will put it in the end of the detailed reference. And so let's move to the Mekong, other major river system in Asia. This river system, as you can see, this is a tidal dominated levee, as you can see the river mouth here. And the plume also show extensively away from the river mouth, extended to the Gulf of Thailand. So let's see a little bit detail. Through the international collaboration in the past 15 years, we diligently work on the offshore area. This is 2006, 2007 research cruise. We do not have too much a survey line immediately off the river mouth. Then in 2014 and 15, we back there specifically focused on immediately off the river mouth here. And so understand the cross-shelf transport and the longshore transport away. So that's with this our chirp system, this our calling system. And I want to show you a couple line, immediately from the river mouth here in this region. So as you can see from the river mouth, and we only have 15 kilometers across the shelf. Within the very short distance, the Mekong River-derived sediment stop. You see the modern sediment sitting on the old seafloor. The boundary is defined easily. And if we put them together, this is the Mekong River Delta. This is all the chirp profile we conducted. We basically understand the whole picture of the offshore, nearshore, offshore part of the Mekong River-derived sediment to the sea. So we put them together. As you can see, immediately near the river mouth, the proximal part, we get up to 10 centimeters per year, the accumulation rate, the sedimentation rate. But I want to point out, away from this river mouth, if we go all the way along the shore to the Khmer Peninsula, this is 300 kilometers away from the river mouth, we still get 10 centimeters per year sedimentation rate. That's very important. So we put them together. This is the isopatch of the Mekong River-derived sediment. As you can see, most of the Mekong River-derived sediment trapped or accumulated within water depth 20 meters. So when we look at this river, we cannot only look at the river mouth, we have to follow the sediment, go all the way along the shore to the distal part, even all the way into the Gulf of Thailand. That's very important. As you can see, the distal depot center here also up to 20 meters sediment accumulation within 20 meters water depth. Across the shelf in this area is relic sand, not too much more than Mekong River sediment accumulated on the shelf. So again, this diagram gives us an idea, the proximal Sebago Delta, proximal depot center here, and then shift all the way along shore, we have a distal Sebago Delta. And of course, if you go through this cross-shelf profile, you still get that kind of beautifully high standard system tract, maximum flooding surface, transgressive surface. But if we only look at this, we only get one snapshot, one transition. We cannot get the whole 3D view. We need to get the proximal and the distal part together. understanding this is very important for us to understand the ancient sedimentary record. So if you want to know more, you can look at this reference in 2017. Okay, the mechanism to driving those sediment to the sea, as you can see during the summer, mainly near the river mouth, but during the winter it's shifted along shore. And I conduct a little bit the numerical modeling, and you can see there's a transport simulation. Ola, could you remove those drawing, the people drawing from the screen? Okay. So as you can see, the sediment during the winter monsoon, those material transport mainly the onshore, along the shore and around the corner. That's very important for us to understand this mechanism. So because in the ancient sediment record, when we found this huge claniform, doesn't mean it's close to the river mouth. Could be a couple hundred kilometers away from the original river mouth. So that's very important. So now we look at the Irrawaddy in Myanmar. So this river system relatively is the unstudied river system. And if we look at this is in a tectonic active region with the subduction in the Andaman Sea and Sumatra with the deep sea trench offshore. And this is the backup basin. And almost this is only one large river system directly discharge sediment to the backup basin with the active faulting. If you think about all the way from Amazon, Mississippi River, now Yangtze, Mekong, you name it. We don't have that such large river system directly dump sediment to this kind of tectonic active margin. And so previously, people thought that these two rivers, the Irrawaddy and the Solomon River dry sediment, might go through the deep sea, through the Mountain Canyon. But 2017 December, 3 years ago, we able to conduct a research cruise over there, as you can see, and we collected 1,500 kilometer seismic chip, and the American graduate student and the Myanmar graduate student working together, both sides, it's very nicely. And as you can see, we collected many high resolution seismic. You see the 3 and 4, we see very nicely the boundary of the mountain distribution from this river system. You see here, it stops here. And furthermore, you can see the river mouth and the river mouth cross the shelf. We also have a very nice Holocene mud, high standard system tract accumulated here, but with offshore with a very active faulting, around here. And then continually you will see, beautifully claniform and accumulated here up to 60 meters. And if we move on, you can see very nicely with the boundary. And you can see near the river mouth, this 3 profile, we don't have big cross-shelf distribution with the limited, with the water depths about 20 to 30 meters stop here. And one thing I want to point out, this system in the western part, in the Bay of the Bengal, we show the sediment possibly all the way sliding down to the deep sea trench here. If you remember, there's a Andaman Sumatra trench, subduction could escape all the way to the deep sea. And now you can see the 3D view. This is near the river mouth. As you can see, the boundary of the modern sediment distribution on the shelf is shown up here. Then you see the other way. You can see this is near the Irrawaddy river mouth, the Gulf of Mountain, and you see the boundary here. Very nice. The other one in the Bay of Bengal, you can see the sediment most likely will sliding down to the deep ocean part. And so now, and we can see, if we also try to see if any sediment bypass or go through this canyon system. We go that's 500 to 1,000 meters, the canyon head. And at this time, at least we did not find any evidence that modern Erosional sediment goes through the canyon and pass to the deep sea. So far, we haven't found evidence. So as you can see, and this is also a patch, and we build up of this river system. As you can see, up to 50 meters have a distal depot center away from the river mouth. Longshore transported eastward accumulated in the Gulf of Martaban in this region. And so most likely, and is so far, we haven't found evidence goes through the canyon. And so this is the primary study. If you want to understand more, you can reference that 2020, this paper published in Marine Geology, the fate of the Erosional Sovereign River-Derived sediment to the sea. So let's look at other large river system, the Amazon River mouth. We know Amazon is the largest river in the world. And if you can see the river mouth alone, this is about 500 kilometers across the river mouth. So you can see very turbid water. And the sediment believed transported all the way along the shore from the mud bank to the Orinoco River. The distance of this transport of Amazon-derived sediment is about 1,500 kilometers. So if you look at it the other way, you can see the material come out. Very, very few material cross the shelf, go to the deep sea, almost zero. But instead, you have a very long stretched mud belt from the Amazon deposit within water depth 60 meters and travel all the way, even reach to Orinoco. Somebody said even past the Orinoco, go to the Sea of the Caribbean. So that's amazing part. So this is why we give this diagram. Amazon also have a similar to what we observed in Yangtze, Yellow, Mekong. So it also have a predominant longshore transport. Now, if we look at the Mediterranean Sea, all the way from the Pearl River, the Rhine River, and the Eber River, as you can see, the Eber River, Rhine River. And let's look at quickly the Pearl River in Adriatic Sea. This is the Pearl River, and this is the plume. Not surprising, once again, a huge amount of big percentage of the material from the Pearl River derived to the sea, derived from this river, transported further along the shore instead of cross the shelf to the deep sea. No, but cross along the shore transport. If you look at this one, this is the mudbed thickness from the Pearl River all the way along the shore coming here. This is almost another 500 kilometers transport, but not directly to the deep basin. No, Adriatic deep ocean, no, but mainly in the northern shore, northern shore of Italy. And you can see the thickness and also the claniform, the second stratigraphy, A, B, and C, as you can see. This is near proximal, this is distal. Similar pattern we observed from Yangtze, from the Mekong, or from the Yellow River, even the Amazon. And let's look at the this river system, in the Mediterranean Sea. This is the Rhine River. This is from our friend Sediments. As you can see, the Siberian Delta, the proximal is around here. That longshore transport actually, also similar, but at the same time, they also observed on the shelf edge that canyon. But the modern sediment, the Holocene material, high standard system, the modern river-derived sediment, only very small percentage able to reach the deep ocean basin through the canyon. Inside the canyon, mainly the material is during sea level low stand. So as you can see here, and I don't want to go to too detail. Ebro River show a similar pattern like the DS 1996 show clearly the plume of the Ebro River is shifted to the right hand, propagation, southernward propagation. And if you look at the sediment thickness, you can see nearly 30 meters near the proximal, then gradually have a longshore transport, come out to the south. And if you look at these two cross section, and we have the near the river mouth cross shelf, this is a longshore transport, as you can see here, very nicely. You can even the plume with the suspended sediment transport away from the river mouth. So if you look at the Nile River system, this is the Nile plume. As you can see clearly, the Nile plume is shifted to the right hand, How far of the Nile River derived sediment to the sea? Where does it go? This is a very interesting question. And I suspect initially 10 years ago, we'll go this way, but very likely our colleague, from Haifa University, Uri, so they conduct a very extensive survey in the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea, offshore of the Israel. So as you can see, this profile show clearly sediment accumulate on the shelf, but at the same time, this is a very narrow shelf. It's different from Amazon, it's different from the Yangtze, different from the Mekong. This is just like California, like an active margin, very narrow margin, very steep margin. And as you can see, sediment is not like the Yangtze, stay near shore, not like the Mekong, stay water depth 20 meters, but instead, there is a longshore transport, but also a major portion cross-shelf transport. That's become very unique. A large river system in an active narrow margin. And so as you can go detailedly to Shatner's paper to take a look. And as I point out, this is a big longshore transport with a big portion cross-shelf transport. But majority, we don't know exactly how much percentage cross the shelf. We need more work. But the idea is, I want to point out, this river system gives us the idea is the combined the large river longshore drifting transport and cross-shelf, maybe gravity flow and sliding down to the deep sea. That's a very interesting system. And if you look at the other system, the Congo River system, so our friend from French, they conduct some survey in the western part of Africa, in this system show very nicely turbidity current deposits from the Congo all the way to the deep sea, even reach to 5,000 meters. And this is different from Amazon. This is different from Yangtze. This is different from the Irrawaddy. And so you can see all the way from the canyon head near the river mouth, transport all the way to the 5,000 meters. So you can go detail, look at their paper published in 2020. And so let's back to Asia, look at the Ganges-Brahmaputra. Ganges-Brahmaputra, you can see that's one of the largest river system in the world. This is the Bay of the Bengal. And this one also developed near the river mouth, the cross shelf, we have very nicely rapid accumulation, the claniform. And so here, But at the same time, this large river system also developed a canyon system like a Congo, and you can see this near almost 10 meters near shore. This canyon is sharply deep into 1,000 meters. So the sediment believe that at least 300 million tons could transport to the deep sea through this canyon system. As our friend, Steve Goodbread and the Kimberly Rogers show, you can see the canyon system develop very active actually now. And so most recently, this paper published the last year show that possible there some kind of terrestrial wood debris transported to the deep sea fan over there. As you can see here, the IODP record, they found that kind of fragment of the woody fragment buried in the deep sea fan there, and multiple layers, and possible what's the mechanism of those Bengal Himalaya forest, they claim Himalaya forest transported and buried over there. It's still not completely understand well, but we strongly believe it could be the Tibetan current through this active canyon or channel transported here. The more observation we need, more study in this system. So, okay, and the last thing I want to mention is the small river system. Like Taiwan, I'll just give you an example. Taiwan is a small island, but there is roughly more than 300 million tons sediment to the sea. So we studied the couple river, like in the western, the Trophy River to the sea. We are able to mapping to understand how much of this Trophy River sediment to the sea. But at the same time, as you can see, there is a big portion from Taiwan could deliver to the deep sea. And so this something our colleague James Liu studied the Coping River and the canyon system. So you can reference there some of the recent work all the way during the typhoon, during the combined earthquake, and the canyon extended all the way near shore area, sediment able to transport all the way through the canyon to the deep sea. So in the end, I want to see many large river systems like the Yangtze, like the Yellow River, like the Mekong. We able to see beyond the delta plain, almost 50% of the material accumulated on shore. And there's also developed the nearshore proximal subaqueous delta, roughly 10 to 20% of the material. But there's other 30 or 40%, almost 40% of the material longshore transported from the distal depot center. And this same thing like even the Amazon, the Amazon even traveled 1,500 kilometers. Like the Yangtze traveled 800 kilometers. One thing I want to point out to the Irrawaddy. Irrawaddy also have a longshore eastward transport, but there is a bi-directional also material transported to the Bay of Bengal, even possibly shifting to the deep sea canyon, the trench, subduction trench. That's a very unique system. And so this is, as I said, a relatively unstudied river system we just studied. And the Ganges-Brahmaputra system is a representative. The large river system could only be transported deep sea is through the canyon, like the Congo, like the Ganges-Brahmaputra. So researchers talk about, Peter Cliff talk about Indus River, even like Sediments talk about the Rhine River. So the canyon, those systems, modern sediment doesn't really go through the deep sea through the canyon. But the Ganges could be an example, modern sediment transported deep sea and historical even, through the canyon system. The Irrawaddy, the sediment is still trapped on the longshore transport, not yet to the canyon system. Maybe after another 500 years or 1,000 years when the when the sediment accumulates more than a rapid accumulation, the Irrawaddy eventually will become a Ganges spermatopoda, will go through the deep sea, through the canyon system. So today I just give a very overview through this large river system. Hopefully I can help the audience, the colleague, have a better understanding across the globe, across the world, the globe, all the way from the East Asia, South America, and to the Mediterranean Sea, Africa. Those large river system, after they deliver to the ocean, where they go. And so I didn't talk about specifically research, but this is the big picture. Somehow is very important for us to get the big understanding of the whole thing. And so if you want to know more of some river I talk about, like the Yangtze River, like the Yellow River, like the Irrawaddy, like some river system, you can go to my webpage or go to just search Jack Paul Liu at Google Scholar. Then you can get all those kind of publications, or you can send me an email. And so I think I will stop here. If you have any question, thank you very much.
Paul, thank you very much for this very interesting and for me really very illuminating talk. The chat is right now open for questions. I see that there are already some questions there and I will read them in due time. Just a reminder for everybody, please don't forget to write where from you're watching us. So Paul, here comes the first question from Stephen from Utah. Do you expect that small rivers will have equal, more or less longshore transport relative to these large rivers?
That's a very good question. Actually, small river, I don't think have an equal amount of the longshore transport. Actually, small river is dominated by cross-shelf transport. There is a reason. The reason is this. If you look at the large river system, if you look at the Amazon, if you look at the Yangtze, if you look at even the Nile River, even most of the Mississippi River, most of this large river system goes through a long way transport, And when the suspended material reaches to the ocean, most of the coarse material has already set down on the way, on the river basin, on the channel. When they reach the ocean, most of the suspended load is a positive plume. When they reach the ocean, those plumes easily be carried away by the coastal current, like Amazon, like the Mississippi River, like Yangtze, Yellow, Irrawaddy, you name it, even the Nile. But a small river is very different. Small river have very short distance. The material is not well sorted. And it's coarse material, sand material, sometimes it's the mountains, small short mountains river. When they shoot to the ocean, they mainly is quickly, if not reach to Harper-Picno, they could be rivet flow. Sometimes they just cross shelf. But some portion, like the Eel River in California, they have some portion longshore transport. At the same time, they have a big portion cross shelf. I think this is the answer.
Okay, Jaco from Wales says, excellent talk, thank you. And there are several questions in here. What is the dominant mode of longshore sediment transport in these deltas? Can you say anything about the ratio of bed load to suspended load transport? Could cross-shelf transport be dominated by bed load transport and bottom-hugging density currents that do not show up on satellite images?
I think, Jack, that's a very interesting question. And I think this community, we need to write a review paper. And about, Jack, you raised a very good question. Most of the large river system, we believe the bed load is 10 or less. And when they reach the ocean, most likely the bed load will contribute to the proximal portion, the near shore, the delta, or subaqueous delta. Mainly the suspended portion, the resuspended part, because after they deliver to the near shore, they could be resuspended during the winter. And those pole suspended fine mud portion was contributed to the longshore drifting. So the bed load, the coarse material could be built the delta and the proximal portion. The fine suspended portion could be built the longshore transport. And so that's the thing. And how much? As I said, commonly it's 10%, but a small river could be up to 40%, or even bad load could be more. Like the Choshu River in Taiwan, I strongly believe is maybe more than 50%.
Next question is from Leslie from Golden, Colorado School of Mines.
Yeah.
Clearly, there are some cross-shelf incised valleys that tie to proximal rivers and some terminate prior to showing that cross-shelf linkage. Can you comment on the controls that generate those cross-shelf linkages and don't? Yeah.
Well, yes, and if there's some inside valley, particularly in the active mountain, for example, in the Yale River in Taiwan, and so the modern small river driving by event, particularly event driving small river system, is like a wild beast, a wild animal, not like a regular big river. When it happened, could be a 100-year event, 500-year event. Those like a big flashing shooting to the ocean, sometimes together with tectonic movement, those could help develop the inside valley or further develop the canyon system, then transport to the deep sea. Large river system in the Pacific margin are very, very few. Even the Mississippi River, you see there is a big canyon to the shelf edge, but the modern sediment, almost no modern sediment really reach that ancient canyon, Peru canyon system. Mainly the Mississippi River all the way to the Galveston, to the Texas. So I think it's very important kind of our work demonstrate those large river system, the big portion of the longshore, we need to pay attention. Yeah.
Okay, there is another question from Stephen. I can't say whether this is the same Stephen from Utah or not, but here's the question. I noticed that several smaller rivers meet the ocean away from large rivers. Is the sediment input from these very minimal, or do you attempt to subtract the sediment volume from these rivers?
Let me see, I'll try to read the question. Can you see that again? I'm sorry, I didn't concentrate.
Okay, you can also see the question in your chat if you open the chat option, but I can read it again, no worries. I noticed that several smaller rivers meet the ocean away from large rivers. Is the sediment input from these very minimal, or do you attempt to subtract the sediment volume from those rivers?
Yes, that's a very good question, Stephen. And because, for example, people study Adriatic Sea, the Po River, and we see the northern Italy, there's a big plume all the way distributed. People try to quantify how much the local small river contribute. Yes, there's some contribution, but not a major, maybe less than 10% or less. Like Yangtze, the Yangtze all the way from the Shanghai, Yangtze Delta transport to Taiwan Strait. On the way, there's 2 or 3 small rivers. There's only, each river only less than 1 million tons. But that Yangtze will 500 million tons sediment. So it do, but it's not a major portion. Somebody studied the clay mineral, geochemical. And so, of course, is the geography different? Some location maybe come a little bit more, some maybe less. And for example, like the Nile River. The Nile River, apparently Israel don't have any large river system. I mean, no rainfall, and it's also purely from Nile. Yeah.
Okay, the next question is from Gary Hampson from London. Thanks for an excellent synthesis. do you see a relationship between the process regime evident in the subaerial delta, river versus wave versus tide dominated, and the degree of subaqueous longshore transport?
That's interesting. The subaerial delta and you know, the tidal dominated. Normally, we don't have a big subaerial delta. You know, we have a tidal distributary channels. But for example, in Irrawaddy, it's a tidal dominated. We have a couple distributed channels. Mekong originally is tidal dominated, but now shifting a little bit wave dominated. And we see with the delta during the Holocene, with the delta propagation from the apex come up from the coin, you know, the wedge, the triangle. Now, when the delta facing to more open ocean, there may be more bigger friction turn to longshore transport because the ocean influence. And there's some dynamic process. We need to do some review work. The initiation of the delta during the middle Holocene and all the way to now, how the delta propagation, how the wave tide and longshore current work together. There's some work, but we need some more comprehensive review, put them together. I think that's, as I always said, the graduate student like to complain. Oh, all the work you guys already done, there's nothing left for me to do. This is a graduate student, but if they pay attention, there's always more questions. When we open one box, always more unknown show up to us. So they should not complain. There's always more unanswered question we need to do.
Well, thank you for this last comment. This is very much true. I agree, indeed. Frank from Germany says, great talk, and wants to know what a role does longshore transport play at sheared margins with large and deep shelf basins, such as the West African transfer margin of Ghana or Ghana Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast.
Yeah. You know, for example, I mentioned the Congo River. I never conduct research, but I know many people, particularly our friend colleague, a German colleague maybe also, and conduct some research. I don't know how much exactly go to the deep sea canyon. Is it 80% or 50%? Or is any portion go along shore? How much? I don't know. I didn't see any. I searched Google. I always Google. You know, I didn't find such a description. And for example, Indus River. Indus River, you know, Peter Cliff, the review, they do the research there, and we found that the river, you know, dumps the sediment. And initially, most of the longshore transport, maybe a very limited portion during the sea level low stand go to the canyon system. And I think the larger, as I mentioned, the larger river system with a positive plume will be easily drifting, shift away from the river mouth by the coastal current. And small river tend to go cross shelf. And also another very important factor is the oceanographic regime. How strong of the coastal current, how strong of the wave and the tide. And if the sediment deliver, even the positive plume deliver to the ocean, if there's no longshore current, you know, shift them away, they will maybe stay near the proximal, then find an opportunity go away to the distal or go to the deep sea. And so there's the geological, oceanographic, river, three combined, we needed to see the equation, the balance.
Okay. Dominic from Houston is saying, great talk, thank you. It would be very interesting to see grain size distribution comparing initial riverbed load, suspended load to longshore deposits, and even the redistributed sediment in the deep water. Grain size, like, let me finish the question. Grain size data combined with your isopaths would be very interesting to see. Thanks.
I agree. That's a very good suggestion. And at the same time, as I mentioned, 20 years ago, before 2000, not so many people talk about the longshore drifting, longshore transport, or distal depot center. Particularly in the oil company, if you look at the UT Austin, and if you look at the people who study the classic sequence stratigraphy, they don't talk about that longshore claniform. They mainly talk about, as I mentioned, the cross shelf, low stand, high stand. So, but our work in the last 20 years should be a worthy attention for this community. When we look at on the field, when we look at a sediment record, show a very nicely claniform. This doesn't mean it associates with the river mouth or cross-shelf transport. This, we have to emphasize this very clearly. This could be a couple 100 kilometers away from the river mouth. This could be a longshore drifting instead of cross-shelf transport. This is something I want to emphasize. Yeah, very good suggestion. Now we do a accumulation rate. We do some green. So far, I haven't remembered a clear pattern, but once again, I need to go back to take a look. Okay.
Next question is from Kate from El Paso, and I have to admit that this is also my question, but she was first to ask it. Can you comment on how important longshore current erosional reworking is in these systems?
Wow, thank you, Kate. Very, very good question. I didn't include it in this slide, but what we observed, longshore transport not only accumulate, but also cause the erosion. For example, in Mekong River Delta, because of the damming, because of reduced sediment supply. But the longshore current, the wave, the tide, still there. But the sediment supply is cut off. And instead of form a longshore sediment accumulation, now on the surface, they cut down 8-meter deep trough formed in the last 20 years, we believe. And it's very interesting. But of course, similar thing observed in the offshore the Mississippi River, like Sam Batley and Kevin Hughes group, they also observed that kind of subaqueous delta erosion because you reduce sediment supply, but your wave current, your tide is still there, and then you kind of lost the balance. Then the longshore transport is reduced, and instead, some proximal portion is becomes the source and become erosion, is cut trough. And this is pretty new and something we need to pay attention to that. Yeah, thank you.
So next are comments, not necessarily questions. Wait a minute, let me just read it. Thanks, Paul. This is from Gary. Well, I forgot where you were from, Gary. I'm sorry, but thanks, Paul. And also for organizing an excellent Soar to Sink talk series. There is an address, website attached to it, highly recommended to others. And from Stephen, what a wonderful talk, thank you. And I think that we are just slowly approaching the end of the seminar. Thank you all very much for participating. Thank you for asking questions and for a lively discussion. And also from me, just, well, Happy New Year. And I wish you All the best.
Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you for those today participate. Thank you, Gary, also point out that webpage. Thank you, Ola, and you are the wonderful host. I have to learn from you.
Thank you. That's very sweet. Thank you.
Okay, so.